Welcome to the lesson on the greatest common factor. Before we start, there are a couple of vocabulary words that I want you to be aware of as we go forward through this chapter. The first one is rational numbers. The definition of a rational number is a number that can be written a over b, where a is an integer and b is a non-zero integer. You can represent a rational number as a fraction or as a decimal. For example, 2/3 would be considered a rational number. Okay. You can also write 2/3 as 0.6 repeating. Okay. You cannot have a number like 3 over 0. Anything divided by 0 like this does not exist. Okay. It's not a real number. The second vocabulary word I want you to be aware of is relatively prime. Yesterday we talked about prime factorization and the difference between prime numbers and composite numbers. And if you remember, prime numbers are numbers that only have two factors, 1 and itself. So when two numbers are relatively prime, it means that they only have a common factor of 1. All right, and we'll see how that works later on in the video. Okay. So that leads us right into what the greatest common factor is. A greatest common factor of two numbers is the largest factor shared by both numbers. You determine the greatest common factor by calculating all the factors of both numbers and finding the largest one that they have in common. For example, they want to know what the greatest common factor of 44 and 66 is. So I'm going to list out all of my factors of 44. So I have 1, 2, 4, 11, 22, and 44. Okay, the factor pairs would be like 1, 44, 2 and 22, and 4 and 11. I'm going to do the same thing with 66. So my factor pairs would be 1 and 66, 2 and 33, 3 and 22, and, oh, we missed one, 11 and 6. Okay, so if we were to look at all of the numbers that they are the common factors of these two numbers, we have 1 in common, we have 2 in common, we have 11 in common, and we have 22 in common. However, the largest or the greatest common factor that they have is 22, and that's where we're going to get our answer from. All right, let's look at another example. So if we list out all the factors of 18, I'm going to start listing them here. I'm going to go 1 and 18. And then I'm going to have 2 and 9, because 2 times 9 equals 18. I'm going to have 3 and 6. Okay, my factors of 24, I'm going to have 1 and 24. I'm going to have 2 and 12. I'm going to have 3 and 8. And 4 and 6. All right, so I'm going to figure out my common factors would be 1, 2, 3, and 6. My largest number that they have in common is 6, so that is my greatest common factor. All right, I'm going to let you try the factors of 36 and 54 on your own. Okay. All right, same thing here. I'm going to let you guys practice it. I think you guys have a good handle on how to do this. All right, so the next part of the lesson that I'm going to talk about is how to find the greatest common factor when we're dealing with a monomial. Now, a monomial is a number, a variable, or the product of a number and one or more variables raised to whole number powers. So for example, you could have 4 as a monomial. You could have x as a monomial. You could have xy as a monomial because they're a product. You could have 3x squared. Okay, you could have 6yz squared. Okay, so on and so forth. Those would be your monomials. Okay, so if we want to find the greatest common factor of a monomial, there are 2 parts to this. Okay, there are the numbers, the coefficients, and the variables. Okay, I find it easier to look at the coefficients first. So I'm going to list out my coefficients for 18 right here. So I have my factors of 18 would be 1 and 18, 3 and 6, and 2 and 9. Okay, my factors of 28 would be 1 and 28, 2 and 14, 3 and 7, sorry, scratch that, 4 and 7. Okay, so there would be my greatest common my factors. So my greatest common factor of the coefficient would be 2. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, okay, the first part of my greatest common factor is 2. Then I'm going to list out all my factors of xy squared. So I'm going to say x, and then I've got a y and a y. Now for 28x squared y squared, I'm going to have x, y, and y. Okay, so the ones that I have in common are 1x and a y and another y. So my answer would be 2x y times y, or y squared. And that would be my greatest common factor. All right. Now I know that I said that I would talk about how something can be relatively prime. So for example, I'm just going to throw something out there for you. For example, if I were to look at 9 and 10, and I wanted to find the greatest common factor of 9 and 10. So the factors of 9 would be 1, 9, and 3. The factors of 10 would be 1, 10, 2, and 5. The only factor that they have in common is 1, so these would be considered relatively prime. You can also have relatively prime situations with monomials as well. All right, please come to class with any questions. Thank you.